So, good morning. I'm so glad to see so many of you here. And thanks, Sandy, for having me. I like having this captive audience. They asked me to speak about the history of the church and anything else I could think about, so my stories. So I'm going to start with me. I was born in Winston-Salem, North Carolina in 1930. My parents brought me to Lakeland in 1946. And I joined Lakeland High School, where I graduated in class of 48. So I'm a dreadnought. Any dreadnoughts in the room? All right. So I attended the first church, and I've made the displays over here of all 4 buildings on the table, so you can see each church, and the things in front of it were part of that church. So I'm going to try to follow that. We'll see. So I attended this second church. I was married in the third church to Harold Snow in December 1954. And our daughters, Cindy and Jane, grew up in the church. They were both baptized here and married here. And our 3 grandchildren were baptized here. Then Harold and I were involved in many ways in the church. We were youth directors, youth advisors, Sunday school teachers, on a lot of committees. Harold was a deacon and an elder. He sang in the choir for over 30 years, and then we got into golf. He formed the first golf tournament. Our daughter Cindy got involved in youth, and I became a youth leader. Chaperoned, I think, every trip there was to Montreat and Fun in the Sun and all the beach trips. When Jane came along, it was a different story. Jane was into the musicals, kids club, and all kinds of activities. And the kids club, I know Randy remembers that one. I used to pick him up to go. But they met in the church downtown. Let's see, that was, trying to think what the kids club was. They had musicals. We had crafts, Bible studies, and all kinds of things, and they would slide down the hill sometimes in the past. That hill was really a nice thing. So, but more about that later. So we became the second parents to a lot of the youth. They even gave us special names. They didn't want to call us Mr. and Mrs. Snow, so they changed it to Peggy, that's P-I-G-G-Y, and Harry, H-A-R-R-Y. So to this day, if I hear one of my kids call me Peggy, I know it's one of my kids. So when after we got through all of that, I've decided that we are part of the church. My mother was baptized here, and she's also buried here, along with my husband there in the columbarium out there. And that's where I will be when I die. So, but anyway, did you know we had a memorials committee? For the columbarium, the memorials, and we also have an archives committee. Anybody know about that? Good. Okay then, let me start with the history of the church then. I'm through with me. There have been 4 buildings, and I've got the pictures as I said. The first one was organized in the Academy, which was at the corner of Tennessee and Lime Street. It's now the Frontier Building, and it has a plaque on it that tells that it was the first school there. And that was where our church, First Church, was organized. And by the way, I live across the street from that Frontier Building, so I look at it every day. Our church was organized there, but the building was built down on Tennessee Avenue next to what is now Mojo's, but it was the federal building. It's north of that was where this first church was built. It would seat like 150 people, and it was a small wooden building, had a picket fence and a central bell tower. But they outgrew that and then moved on to the second building, and that was located at 116 South Massachusetts Avenue, which overlooked Lake Mirror. That was in 1919. So it was next to what we at that time called the New Florida Hotel. I'm not sure what it's called today. So the third church building was in 1955, and it was between the second church and the New Florida Hotel. No, I think it's now called Lake Mirror Plaza or Lake Mirror Plaza. Does anybody know? I don't. Okay. Well, anyway, that was built between that. And then it was, let's see, the second church building was demolished after the first service. Then we came to the fourth building, which we're in now, that was in 1978. And that's all the stories about the building. Okay, so I'm going to start with the first story about the first Sunday school class for the men that was in the first church. The men decided they needed a Bible class, and this was in 1920, and they came together and decided to call it the regular fellows class. It was taught by the minister at that time, who was Dr. Charles Raymond, and then in 1925, one of the members, B.G. Orndorff, decided he would teach the class. And the ladies at that time had their own. They didn't attend together, which I thought was interesting. There were 4 other churches within walking distance of this one. And Mr. Orndorff's skill as a Bible teacher attracted many of the people who came for Sunday school and then went back to their own church. At one time, they had as many as 350 members or more. And so many that they had to meet in the Palace Theater building, which is now Palace Pizza. That was a block away. So they eventually had to build an addition to the church on the south side because the regular fellows were in business at home. They were known for their singing, and they had several song leaders, including V.P. Self and my very own Harold Snow. WLAK radio station started broadcasting the weekly Sunday school lesson in 1936 and ended it in 1956 when they could no longer afford the cost of the broadcast. They were the longest continuing class in our church. They continued at least through 1988. And they celebrated their 50th anniversary on May 3rd, 1975, with a dinner that served 170 guests. I have pictures of that over here that I don't know where they came from, but it's pictures of everybody there. And some of them are still living. You can see I was there. So I was there. So, but they're on the table, and it also tells the menu and how much it cost, which I thought was very interesting. So you can all look at that later. So that was the regular fellas. And then we came across the Christmas tree. How many of you know about the floating Christmas tree? It's part of Lakeland's Christmas tradition. But did you know that in the beginning it started with our church? Anybody know that? Our Boy Scout troop was sponsored by the Lakeland Rotary Club and the First Presbyterian Church, and it was when Dr. Raymond was the minister, and he was also the scoutmaster. So in the early 1930s, he came up with the idea of the scouts putting a tree on Lake Morton, a Christmas tree. Their scout house was off of Lake Martin in a wooded section, and they decided they would get a tree. Well, back then you couldn't go any place to buy trees. You had to find them. So they found a short-leaf pine, found a couple of logs and made a raft, and then decided they would put it out in the lakes. So they got on some of them started swimming out to the raft. I mean, the raft out in the middle. Getting confused now. But before that, they decorated, I forgot that part, with flour sacks that they had painted and stuffed with moss. So they started with it out in the lake and got halfway there, and the wind came and blew it over, and that was that. So I don't know if they tried it again that year, but they later decided they were going to try it again. But this time they wanted it lighted so everybody could see it. So they did the flower bags, painting them different colors on that one. Well, on the next one, they wanted lights. So they took light bulbs from home, every size, wattage, any kind, it didn't matter. They took light bulbs. They painted the light bulbs, not knowing what happens to light bulbs if they're painted. So after they got the light bulbs, and then they started getting the cords, the electric cords, wires, and everything they could find, and turned the lights on and wired them to the trees. There must have been 100 bulbs or more. So they took the cords down across the lake, the walk, whatever it is, around the lake, and into the lake. Got them all out in the middle. Got them out in the middle, and Dr. Raymond plugged in the plug, and boom, all the lights went out. There was nothing but smoke, a deep, deep smoke that was all over South Lakeland, because moss doesn't burn, it smokes. So it had short-circuited the transformer, and South Lakeland became completely dark. So the boys were scared to death, but Dr. Raymond calmed them all down, and now we know why Lakeland, the Boy Scouts don't do the trees anymore. But Willie Wilson and Tommy Langston were two of the scouts, and Tommy was one of the members here. So we tied that one all in together. That's one of my favorite stories. We also have a folder on the Christmas tree that we had in the past. Okay, that's two. What's next? Next is the subscription quilt. Yeah, Mary Lib. There is a quilt hanging in the hallway. Does anybody know where it is? Going out toward the columbarium? Okay, do you know what it is? It's a subscription quilt that was ordered by the women of the church in 1935 to be made and presented to Dr. and Mrs. Charles Raymond on the occasion of their 10th anniversary at First Presbyterian Church. To have your name embroidered on the church, you paid a sum of $1. In some places, it said 50 cents, which I think is probably right, to have your name embroidered on there. So it was found by George Raymond, who was Dr. Raymond's son, and some of his treasures. And they had it framed and donated it to the church. And I know we wondered at the time where we were going to put it, but they found a place. And the next thing, who remembers Rebecca Keith? Yay! I had her as a school teacher. So, so in 1954, did you know that the Polk County school superintendent asked a young teacher, who was Rebecca Keith, if she would start a credit union? They needed one. So he asked her if she would manage it as the first treasurer. So she accepted the job and went about setting up all appropriate paperwork. She started accepting deposits, which she was known to keep at home in a shoebox under her bed. Polk County Teachers Credit Union began with only 10 members and ends the first year with 273 members and about $7,000 on deposit. It later becomes Mid-Florida Bank. I'm sure a lot of you knew that story. Okay, 1974, she organized the Spirit of Service, which is what this is, or was, SOS, now Older Adult Ministry. But it was later shortened from Spirit of Service to SOS. So we know what they do. They have music, inspiration, information, all kinds of activities, and trips back then by chartered bus, made to places like SeaWorld and Disney World and all kinds of places. And Rebecca was the coordinator of that. And then, did you also know she was one of the first women elders in the church? Margaret Lloyd was the other one. Okay, now we're to the snow golf tournament. Anybody know about that? Well, we never knew back in 1970, when Harold and I decided to organize a golf tournament for fellowship, that it would still be going 53 years later. Is that right, Randy? Back then, we usually teed off before noon so we could finish 18 holes in time to go home and pick up your spouse for dinner. It was always held at Cleveland Heights. and had Mr. Reuben Gibson grill us steaks, and if I remember correctly, they were T-bones, and everybody got one, and that cost either $3 or $4 each. Big deal. Then we got that along with the baked potato and the salad too. So after the dinner, we had an award ceremony where we passed out trophies to all the winners. Had a lot of door prizes back then if we had people that were generous, but usually had as many eating as we did playing. And then we never had a minister who played golf until Dr. Mike Loudon came along in 2000. We were so excited to finally have a golfing pastor. We honored him one Sunday in church with a golf hat, sleeve of balls, and a plaque that read, "Our first putting pastor." He hasn't missed a tournament yet. And now we have our second golfing pastor, Dr. John Fullerton. Over the years, we changed golf courses almost yearly, whichever one had the best deal. And then about 2004, we decided it was time to turn this over to someone younger. It was getting harder to get sponsors and door prizes. We picked Randy Gilbert to take over, and he has done an amazing job with his family, Lisa, Kathy, and the rest. And it was under one condition that he take this. He had to coordinate all the tournaments as long as we lived. No one else is allowed. He brought it back to Cleveland Heights. He involved his family and kept me involved. Thanks to Kathy Gilbert and Deborah Harrington for always being there to check you in and hold down the fort. And they do a good job on that too. Well, next. Gonna need a page turner. Oh, Corrie ten Boom. Did you know she came to visit? Anybody remember Corrie ten Boom? Renee, where are you? Okay, she wrote. Is anybody that doesn't know about Corrie ten Boom? She wrote The Hiding Place. I have a copy of it over there. Well, she was our speaker at our third church downtown on November 7th, 1973. She and her Dutch family were arrested for helping the Jews escape the Holocaust during World War II by hiding them in their home. And they were sent to the concentration camp. And this book tells about how they made it through that and after they were in prison. She and her companion, though, came to Lakeland and conducted a prayer of fasting in our church. It was overwhelming. The women of First Pres found them a hiding place out in the highlands where they could rest for a few days. I don't know where that was. I went out there and I couldn't find it now to save my life. But the ladies of the church fixed food and took it to them. And I was one of the lucky ones who delivered food. My daughter Cindy and I made homemade ice cream, of all things, and delivered it and visited with Corrie and Ellen Kroom, who was her companion. I have a picture on the table of Corrie. So, and also if you, I taped her talk. And guess who decided to be Corrie ten Boom? Renee Hawk. Has everybody here heard her presentation? If you haven't, you need to. She's done a fantastic job and going around different places, including SOS. So thank you, Renee. Okay. Huh. We're getting there. Okay. Now we're down to the wooden cross. In our old church, the third church, we had a wooden cross. It was in the front of the sanctuary. It is now in the chapel here of the front church. Hazel Morrison was the owner of Gentry Morrison Funeral Home, and when we moved here, she wanted this chapel built as a replica of the downtown church, and that included the cross. So we had to sell the downtown church to move here. And Reverend Bob Harrington, who was the chaplain of Bourbon Street, bought the church. He wanted to establish a Christian motivational center and also wanted the cross. And the story goes that Bob was gone for a few weeks. He was out of town. On his return, he missed the cross. he called and asked to have it returned. But by that time, the cross had been installed in our new chapel, and we weren't too excited about giving it back. So some nice person, I found out from notes and telling me, Willis Taylor had a Finnish carpenter build another cross similar to the original one. They took it down and installed it in the Massachusetts Avenue Church. Bob never knew the difference, and we got to keep the original cross. I love that story. Willis had made a tape of quite a few stories, and I was privileged to listen to it, and that's where I got my stories about that one and the chapel. Oh, there's another one he told too. This was one of my. This is the chapel steeple. Did you ever look at it when we first came about how nice it was and how pretty? Did you know there was a difference in it? And did you ever wonder why? When the chapel steeple was being installed, the cross didn't fit on the steeple as it should. So Willis Taylor and Otto Zimmerman, who was his cohort in all of this, went to Crowder Brothers at Southgate, purchased a toilet bowl float. It was painted white to match the steeple and installed below the cross. It worked, and it fit on the steeple, and it's now on display. Because later on, Hurricane Gene came along and blew it down, and Pastor Mike found it and saved it. So there it is. We can thank Pastor Mike for that. That's one of my favorite Willis stories. Now I've run into some things I didn't find a place for. They're just here and there. So I wanted to say that we have three pastors that have been to the House of Representatives to offer prayer. FPC's had three. Dr. Henry Dahlberg was in 1980, Mike Loudon in 2016, and John Fullerton in 2023. Okay, then there was Kids Club back down in the third church. This is a group of 2nd through 6th graders who meet on Wednesday afternoons from 3:30 to 5:30 for refreshments, choir practice, crafts, recreation, and Bible studies. That was Jane and Randy both were in that. Then we had a slip and slide contest downtown on the third church. But it's a beautiful hill down behind it. And we also, the youth would take refrigerator boxes, tear them apart, paint them, decorate them, whatever they wanted to do. Y'all have any ideas what you did? No? Okay. Then you would slide down the hill. It was a big contest. We were given prizes. Our final one was held in May 1978, and the winners were Doug Stovall and my very own Jane Snow. Jane has graciously shared her trophy over here that she got that day. And the other thing is, did you ever pay attention to the chandeliers in the sanctuary? Did you ever wonder about them? Did you know there are 56 lights in each one? They're 8 feet wide, 6 feet tall, and they weigh 400 pounds each. Don't get underneath them. Now we're to the stained glass. I love the stained glass windows. How many of you know all the history of the stained glass? Would you like to know? Would you like a copy of it? We have stained glass folders that I have had asked for new folders. We had one before, so I've had them print up some new folders, and I've added on the one about the sanctuary stained glass. So Randy and Cindy are going to pass out these. So,
read James out.
Huh?
Jane.
Jane. Oh, Jane. What's your name? Okay, Jane and Randy are going to pass out these, so you will have them, and you can now go to the church and you can read what they say, and you read it from the bottom up. I know when these ones in the Welcome Center, the Lancet windows were added on, Susan and Mike Bladden and I went down and helped pick out the panel for that one. So all the stained glass windows were brought down from here from the third church. So they're now all installed here. Okay. Now I've got one I'm going to read. It's too important not to. And I just got the information, so I didn't have it. Anyway, in 2003, this is about Rebecca Keith and SOS. 2003, Rebecca Keith, a longtime and faithful member of First Presbyterian Church, gave the church a gift of $100,000 to strengthen our older adult ministry. This endowment was provided funding in part for a coordinator of older adult ministry position. Over the years, the efforts of Reverend Don Kemp, Reverend Dick Huggins, and Judy Kemp have strengthened this ministry while serving in this position. Sandy McCrory is our current older adult ministry coordinator, having served in this position for 9 years. A growing number of our congregation have enjoyed programs, fellowship, and fun social outings under her dynamic leadership. Miss Keith's gift is truly the gift that keeps giving. Under careful management of the Endowment Committee and our investment managers, the Keith Endowment Fund has grown to over $229,000. 10 years ago, based on the proper committee's recommendation, the session approved the purchase of a new Elkhart Coach Ford bus for our older adult ministry at a cost of $61,000 through the Keith Endowment. This bus can hold 15 passengers, including 2 wheelchair travelers. The bus has been a blessing to this ministry and other ministries of the church. It is used to transport members from the Presbyterian homes, Lake Morton Plaza, and other places to Sunday worship by our older adult ministry on their many trips and excursions by our youth, special needs and fine arts, and most recently, our Celebrate Recovery ministry. We give thanks to Ms. Keith as her gift continues to support the needs of First Presbyterian Church and our older adult ministry. Now, how about that? I always wondered what that endowment was. Now I know. So that was interesting. My last thing is my life, my book, our book. This is the history starting from 1885 to 2010 that Susan Rogers and I spent 10 months doing research for. We had a lot of memories in that, built a lot of friendships. We did a lot of searching from museums to the church session minutes to anything. But it includes not only the church, the Lakeland, and the world. It's out of print, but if you want one, I understand if we make a list that they might reprint one for you. So if you did not get one of these, it's a good reference point. So that's the end of mine. Thank you very much.